Nurul Izzah sendiri dijemput ke World Economic Forum dalam sesi forum terbuka bertajuk Leveling the Playing Field di Davos, Switzerland. Ingat senang-senang ke nak jadi panelis WEF? Kena ada reputasi dan kredibiliti yang diiktiraf di peringkat antarabangsa. Sesuai sangatlah dengan kelayakan dan pengalaman beliau.
So I come from Southeast Asia, Malaysia specifically, and it's a very important region. It is strategic. Its strategic neutrality is always utilized for semiconductor-related investments, and of course for manufacturing. And Malaysia, as well as the other nations in Southeast Asia, remain a pivotal part of the semiconductor value chain.
Sepatutnya kita rasa bangga. Nurul Izzah secara tak langsung telah mengangkat nama Malaysia ke pentas antarabangsa. Nurul Izzah mewarisi kepimpinan ayahnya yang diiktiraf dunia sehingga dijemput ke World Economic Forum. Satu pencapaian yang jelas menunjukkan kredibiliti dan pengaruhnya di peringkat antarabangsa.
Nurul Izzah Anwar, putri sulung Perdana Menteri Malaysia, Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim, mendapat undangan istimewa ke World Economic Forum, WEF, di Davos, Swiss. Kehadiran Nurul Izzah dalam sesi forum terbuka bertajuk Leveling the Playing Field menjadi bukti bahwa Malaysia semakin mendapat perhatian di kancah global. Meski begitu, tidak semua pihak menyambut positif pencapaian ini. Segelintir netizen dan pihak tertentu mencoba mencabar keterlibatan Nurul Izzah dengan menyuarakan berbagai kritikan dan tuduhan tanpa dasar. Namun, melihat dari sudut yang lebih luas, keterlibatan seorang warga Malaysia dalam forum bergengsi dunia ini seharusnya menjadi kebanggaan bersama. Sebagai individu yang aktif dalam kebijakan publik, Nurul Izzah tidak sekadar menumpang nama ayahnya. Saat ini, ia memimpin sebuah badan pemikir yang fokus pada pemberdayaan wanita dan generasi muda di Malaysia.
Setiap kali Perdana Menteri Datuk Seri Anwar Ibrahim keluar negara untuk lawatan rasmi, pasti ada saja mata yang tak senang duduk. Terutama bila Nurul Izzah Anwar, anak beliau, turut serta dalam rombongan tersebut. Pembangkang dan penyokong tegar mereka pantas menyerang, menuduh kononnya ini gaya kroni. Ada yang sinis menyindir PMX dan Nurul Izzah bercuti satu keluarga. Ada juga yang cakap Nurul Izzah ni tetap dapat jawatan meskipun kalah dalam PRU. Hai, pembangkang ni memang ada saja yang tak kena di mata mereka. Dasar mata lalat. Siapa kata Nurul Izzah tak ada jawatan? Untuk pengetahuan semua, Nurul Izzah kini mengetuai Politi, sebuah badan pemikir yang fokus kepada pemberdayaan wanita dan belia dalam komuniti. Bukan itu saja, beliau juga mempengurusikan Sekretariat Badan Penasihat Khas kepada Menteri Kewangan yang diketuai oleh Tan Sri Hassan Merican, Penasihat Petronas, Syarikat Minyak Kebanggaan Negara. Jadi, tak peliklah kalau beliau ikut serta dalam rombongan PMX. Tak perlu tengok jauh pun. Nurul Izzah sendiri dijemput ke World Economic Forum dalam sesi forum terbuka bertajuk Leveling the Playing Field di Davos, Switzerland. Ingat senang-senang ke nak jadi panelis WEF? Kena ada reputasi dan kredibiliti yang diiktiraf di peringkat antarabangsa. Sesuai sangatlah dengan kelayakan dan pengalaman beliau.
Turning, in this quest where you want to achieve GDP per capita numbers, and I love that Carmen said you come to WEF, you come to Davos, and you really want to hear that there is concern on the things that matter. It's not just about leveling up the ceiling, getting economic growth, but also making sure you're leveling up the floor. And up to 75% of Southeast Asian women, numbering 350 million of them.
Sepatutnya kita rasa bangga. Nurul Izzah secara tak langsung telah mengangkat nama Malaysia ke pentas antarabangsa. Nurul Izzah mewarisi kepimpinan ayahnya yang diiktiraf dunia sehingga dijemput ke World Economic Forum. Satu pencapaian yang jelas menunjukkan kredibiliti dan pengaruhnya di peringkat antarabangsa.
Nurul Izzah Anwar, Executive Director of Politi.
Salam and hello everyone. Thank you, Claudia. My name is Izzah Anwar, and I started as a political activist, was Member of Parliament, fortunate enough for 15 years, and then our party led a coalition in power. In 2021, during COVID, in my constituency, we managed to conduct a multidimensional poverty index study. It's the first COVID-related study, which I think is crucial as we exit the pandemic. And now I am in the policy space, and I'm really glad to be here the first time in Davos And I hope all of us can really have a robust discussion. And thank you, all of you, for giving up dinner for us.
Well, no, you'll have dinner later, hopefully. Yeah. Don't give it up completely. Yes, please. Sure. What is the real problem that we're seeing in gender equality? And I would like to bring your perspective, Izzah, from Asia, please.
Thank you, Claudia. So I come from Southeast Asia, Malaysia specifically, and it's a very important region. It is strategic. Its strategic neutrality is always utilized for semiconductor-related investments, and of course for manufacturing. And Malaysia, as well as the other nations in Southeast Asia, remain a pivotal part of the semiconductor value chain. But beyond that, I think what's concerning, in this quest where you want to achieve GDP per capita numbers, and I love that Carmen said, you come to WEF, you come to Davos, and you really want to hear that there is concern on the things that matter. It's not just about leveling up the ceiling, getting economic growth, but also making sure you're leveling up the floor. And up to 75% of Southeast Asian women, numbering 350 million of them, are in informal work. You have no work insurance, it's very, very precarious, and of course it's a low-wage economy. So I mentioned earlier, when I was a Member of Parliament, my third term, we did the Multidimensional Poverty Index study. So we added the 3 COVID-related measurements, and we saw that female-headed households have it worse. And the children of these female single moms, right, they will be inheriting intergenerational trauma. So that's why for me today, the quest and the push for social protection, safety nets, for gender inclusion, because you want boys, and later on in Block 3, Claudia will show this, you want boys to be part of the equation. And it's so scary because, as what Amitabh alluded to, the Gallup poll has showcased, we speak so much about reducing the gender gap, but there's this gender polarization taking place in countries like America, South Korea, Europe, where younger boys are becoming extremely right-wing and lesser academically qualified. Younger girls are becoming far more qualified because we study hard, but more liberal in their viewpoints. And this growing polarization, of course, will cause social strife, ethnic tensions, gender-based tensions. And that's why, for me, this conversation, we have to address the informality to make sure women can reach their full potential, but also include boys in the conversation so that there's mobility on all fronts. Now, looking into Malaysia, we have a smaller percentage of informal workforce, 9.8%, from those working formally, in the working population. So that's encouraging. But I think that's why you don't want to rest on your laurels, right? You want to look deeper. And only 60% of people of working population are covered under our workers' pension, the employees' provident fund. So that's why, for me, I like the focus that you're not just saying, okay, we're upper middle income, we've hit the success, but you're always constantly looking at ways. How do you make sure that more people are covered? We have 4 million people, 55% men, 45% women, who are working in a gig economy. And if you're a gig Grab driver, you know that you're not going to get more, make more money in the next 5 years when you're a lot older and more tired. So that's why, for me, again, going back to the agenda, when we have clear-cut policies, we introduce policies 5 years after Bangladesh did their microcredit program for women. What am I saying? I'm saying that in this crazy, polarized, with the American president being the way he is, we still have ways where we can learn from the global south, leverage from each other, and implement programs which we'll talk about later. But that's why we need this urgency, this sense of urgency to change the status quo.
Thank you so much, Izzah. What about you, Izzah? What are you doing for backlash fighting? Like, how are you dealing with this?
So that's why I mentioned the lost boy syndrome, because, you know, in a particular war-torn region or genocide, you have the lost boys for Sudan, right, or the lost boys for Gaza, whereby they lose the opportunity to enjoy life, to live life normally like other people. So in Malaysia, you know, you can also bring this concept whereby, because of the lost opportunities of enjoying formal education, they end up not having a meaningful job opportunity. So there's that sense of displacement. It's zero sum. Another woman takes my place, right? Another woman in university. And these women are talking about women's rights, and they're being promoted in the civil service, in the private sector, and they become bosses. So in a way, you're having to ensure that this location, whether it's an elderly village head leader or whether it's a young boy, everybody is accorded that opportunity to enjoy mobility. So it is far more challenging for us because we know that women and girls have been left behind for so long. But in order to make sure that this quest for gender parity survives the onslaught, in order to make sure it's sustainable, we need to make them part of the equation. So in Malaysia, we're putting the technical and vocational education front and center for the programs. We are getting the young boys. You go for microcredential program is fine. For as long as you have that diploma, you have that certification to improve your job prospects. And this is being done in a big way where billions are being spent so that there at least will be some degree of mobility enjoyed by different stakeholders. We also introduced, now the last point, because housewives, right? Nobody really bothers about the household chores that you do. So Malaysia introduced, again in collaboration with the Social Pension Fund, giving social security for housewives, right? Because again, you also have to educate the husbands. You know, you got to be responsible. So part and parcel of that, again, is to change mindsets, and you cannot ignore education, and even as you introduce programs and policies to plug in these different segments. To
both. So that you're saying is there's domestic violence. We're too focused on only talking about the women and protecting women as opposed to also educating men and bringing them on board.
In England, I mean, that's how you juvenile delinquents, right? You intervene with the boys. The bullies, right, the ones who got bullied will eventually become future bullies.
Because that's the backlash. Get ready for your questions. We're coming soon. Okay, I want to talk about AI and the use of technology. Okay, Izzah, close us. Solutions, and where are you in the spectrum of...
I'm going to borrow John Mearsheimer, his take on being a hopeful realist, because actors, governments, white male, usually act based on a realistic viewpoint. And from there, it helps us plan better, right? Because if we expect people sometimes to just act on the basis of ethics, that's not going to work out. But our decision, our actions has to be predicated on ethics. AI, how do you make sure AI works well? Well, if there's no ethics there, of course, it's going to go crazy and it will turn the whole world into an explosion of cruelty. So for me, important to look at it from that point of view. Then you plan, you need to have first and foremost an ecosystem that allows for women, allows for men, the abusers as well as the abused, to seek help. So where do you go, right? If you want to escape your domestic abuser, where do you go? So I think that's important for governments to take into account. Governments also have to energize the strength of CSOs. We talk so much about civil society being the bulwark of trusted institutions. Well, governments are wasting their space if they're not utilizing the smartest, not just to plan in terms of utilization of AI, but to have an ecosystem that's inviting for good things to happen. And the third, I believe in scalability. Aisha mentioned this, and you know, for ASEAN, when you talk about women, peace and security, one of the things that Polity is planning is to have experts from South Thailand, South Philippines, Southeast Asia, because clearly if we band together kind of make sure the solutions are replicated in an effective manner, and this means lobbying with your governments. You got to make sure the government does the right thing, because time is not on our side. So I hope that everyone understands. You're not just coming here, you listen, but you got to act as well, because the world is on fire. And if you don't act, then all of us, our children, the future generation, will not have a future worth living for. No, I just want to say that, companies like Vitrox is a major company in Malaysia on semiconductor, and they actually set up their own academy. They basically ensure that 2,000 students every year is educated. So I think private sector can also benefit from having sufficient and targeted human capital, but also include gender sensitization and all that, but not just come for the sake of, for example, installing data centers without any benefits or multiplier benefits to the local community. So I think it's a call for them as well. It works for them because you need, for example, STEM and engineers far more, but this is a welcome from all countries in Southeast Asia for that purpose.
And we do want private sector working on technology solutions that will actually just like close the gender gap.
I'd like to know if I'll see gender parity in my lifetime, and I'm 13 years old. And as we know, the World Economic Forum predicts that it will take 134 years for gender parity to happen. But today, a report released from the Female Quotient states that 58% of employees think that employers can close the gap in 10 years if they wanted to. So my question is, what is a realistic hope?
So I'm so happy to hear that question. The first one, which reminded me of my daughter, she's 17, and it brings me home that you have to have hope, right, no matter what. And I think the fact that we're talking about this, the fact that we're alive, we're here, certainly signals something that can be done. And I remember when I was 17, it was a religious leader, my ustaz, that told me the closest to God is one that services as many people as possible. So women are not just made to become mothers, women are leaders. And I think therein lies that solution, the fact that you have to work for progressive ideas, for thinking. I went to a Catholic school, if you must know. So for me, again, education. We can't run away from that, and we can't run away from the fact that we have to engage different stakeholders, especially persons of influence.
Thank you so much.
Ria News akan terus memberikan berita terbaru dan terupdate mengenai Indonesia dan Malaysia, memberikan informasi yang akurat dan relevan bagi Anda. Jangan lewatkan perkembangan terkini yang akan kami hadirkan setiap saat.